Pocketknives and buffalo skinning. In chapter 34 of Hunting Charm, Hunter Brantley uses a knife. Indeed, in the chapter, there's something of a knife fight. So, for today's plate of history beans, let's take a look at pocketknives and buffalo skinning. Unrelated topics, except for how their existence fits into our overall topic, the Old West. First of all, I'll say I'm no expert on knives, and I'm certain there are many more authoritative sources on this subject. So I'll try to have a little fun with the topic, just to keep things interesting. My first observation on knives is to dispel a possible myth of life in the 18th and 19th century Old West. The notion that everyone ran around with knives strapped to their sides, wearing buckskins, and not bathing isn't entirely true. Certainly there were a few individuals out there, but by the mid-1800s, the famous mountain men, fur trappers, were largely a thing of the past. To find a burly bearded guy traipsing around the wilderness smelling like a bear, you would have to travel to Canada, Alaska, perhaps, or the northern reaches of Montana or Wyoming. By that time, pocketknives had become very popular, so let's start there. Pocketknives are old. They've been around since around 500 BC. The earliest knives were similar to the folding type blade one sees today, except they didn't have any spring or locking mechanisms one finds nowadays to help keep the knife open. Some knives had a set screw to keep the thing open. Honestly, like most pocketknives nowadays, they weren't built for heavy-duty usage. If you wanted a knife for butchering or skinning or cooking, you used a fixed blade knife. I did find there are a lot of different names for the different types of pocketknives. Some of them are mildly amusing, so here's my list. I'll list these in alphabetical order. The canoe, so named because it looks a little like a canoe. The Congress. This knife usually contains 3 or 4 blades, thus the term Congress. In case you didn't know, the word Congress sometimes means a collection of things. But I like to think of this like it was 3 or 4 slimy congressmen all folded up together in the same narrow set of views. The cotton blade, or cotton sampler. This one has a hole for a lanyard and a rather larger braid, ostensibly for use in fields. The dog leg usually has 2 blades that open from the same end. I'll say this is one of the more common pocketknives. I had one I carried for a gazillion years. It's still in a drawer somewhere. If you open it just right, it looks a little like a dog's leg. The elephant's toenail, a fatter knife, one with 2 blades that open from opposing ends. There were several others like the hawkbill, muskrat, melon tester, the lady leg, sodbuster, sowbelly, stockman, sunfish, the toothpick, the tracker, etc. The knife I carry nowadays is one of those multi-tool deals with pliers and a couple of serrated blades I can't hardly open. Even so, it comes in handy now and then, like yesterday when I was out on my normal daily walk at a local lake. A woman was there fishing with her son, and they pulled a catfish from the local in-city pond. Both of them seemed at a loss as to how to get the thing off the hook, so I stopped, pulled out my handy-dandy tool, and helped them out. When I got home, I smelled like catfish, but the boy seemed excited and looked at me like I knew something, which made me feel good. As far as other knives in the 19th century, you have, of course, the iconic Bowie knife. Everyone, I'm sure, knows that story, so I won't say anything more about that knife. The knife I find more interesting, and one unique to a certain way or era of the Old West, has to be the skinning knife. Since I was a boy, I've been interested in the great slaughter of buffalo. Again, something everyone knows is how hunters killed off hundreds of thousands of the great beasts in around 10 years. I've often wondered what it would have been like to be a skinner for one of those hunters. First off, skinning isn't easy work. Nowadays, I would think you would be hard-pressed to find men that can actually skin an animal with much efficiency. Machines do the job in meatpacking facilities. I suppose there are hunting guides that probably skin a deer with some regularity. As for the skinning knife, it is a rather specialized tool. First skinning knives used during the Great Buffalo Slaughter would have been of the fixed blade variety. The knives themselves were made of steel and had a curved blade that allowed the skinner to make curving cuts with less chance of the blade piercing the animal's flesh and therefore damaging the hide. Imagine for a moment what it would be like to skin a buffalo. First off, if you work for one of the hunters who shot buffalo with the famous Sharps 50 caliber rifles, you wouldn't be looking at just one buffalo. It's said that a hunter could kill as many as 100 buffalo in an hour. As you probably know, buffalo, if shot cleanly, don't stir a ruckus, but rather simply fall while the rest of the herd continues grazing. A normal buffalo hunting party consisted of 4 men, 2 hunters, and 2 skinners. The hunters would shoot a number of animals, then assist with the skinning, which was by far the more time-consuming job. Wagons were used to assist with the process. A line would be attached to one of the dead bison's back legs, and the skin removed from that side. Then, using the wagon, the skinners would flip the carcass to expose the other side. From a couple of accounts, it seems skinners could process 3 or 4 animals in an hour, which begs a question. Buffalo hunting lore, a grisly history, abounds with tales of hunters killing huge numbers of bison. Buffalo Bill, for example, is said to have killed over 4,200 buffalo in 18 months. One hunter, Billy Tilgham, claimed to have shot 250 bison in a single day. He had 15 skinners to process the fallen beasts. That's it for today's Plate of History Beans. As always, if you like my content, hit the like and subscribe buttons. I would be truly grateful. I'll have a couple of links to some information regarding knives and buffalo skinning. If you like my novel Hunting Charm, I'll also have a link below where my books are available for purchase. Now it's time for Chapter 34 of Hunting Charm, A Thief in the Night. Chapter 34, A Thief in the Night. The man who ambushed Matt and me on top of that rock rode out alone. Cecil looked around nervously. He slipped up on us on that rock like a ghost. Now he's on our trail. He's liable to shoot us or us him, Brant whispered, holding a single finger to his lips. Yes, sir. I ain't taking him lightly, but I ain't stopping neither. No, sir. They traveled south along game trails until darkness made navigation impossible. We stopped for an hour to rest the horses. Brant examined the small clearing. Even though he could hardly see his own hand in the dark, he felt uneasy about the mysterious dark-haired man. He had seen how the man managed to appear suddenly atop the rock and take Matt hostage. Cecil dismounted and picketed the mounts, leaving them saddled. He gave both animals water, thinking ruefully about the 18 mules he had been forced to leave behind. He hoped they wouldn't starve in the wilderness. Burrowing beneath the fragrant limbs of a cedar, he settled in, hoping for a little rest. He couldn't say if he slept, but at some point he realized they weren't alone. Looking around nervously, he saw a vague outline of Brant slumped against a rock, breathing deeply. Then in the dim light provided by the moon filtering through the brush, he saw movement. Sir? He shouted as a shadow appeared at Brant's side. There was a brief struggle and then a loud thud. Slippery bastard, be still, Brant said. A moment later, Cecil sparked to Lucifer and had his lamp lit. Brant, a much larger man than his opponent, had Martine pinned, but struggled to hold the squirming thief. With a tremendous swing of his fist, Brant punched Martine once, then a second time. The blows, enough to render most men unconscious, didn't stop Martine. The thief surged back, producing a knife from somewhere. Brant barely managed to avoid the blade thrust at his neck. Don't you move, Cecil at Brant's side, lantern in one hand, rifle in the other, fired into the dirt by Martine's head. Martine, scowling, gradually relaxed, settling back onto the dirt, rubbing his chin where Brant had slugged him. Brant eased away, then pulled a pair of shackles from his saddlebag, and with Cecil standing guard, secured Martine's hands behind his back. A long moment of silence passed. Brant couldn't say how he had evaded Martine's initial thrust. He had been sleeping, then suddenly found himself awake and standing. It was almost as if his body had sensed Martine's presence and acted on its own. "I'm impressed," Martine said. "What?" "I didn't know how you did it. Both of you should be dead right now. You're either very lucky or no one has ever escaped Francois." The man's arrogance annoyed Brant. The smirking tone, the single arched eyebrow. "I guess you didn't notice you're on the ground with your hands chained behind your back. A momentary inconvenience. You're very lucky." It wasn't luck. Brant knew it probably was luck. "Who are you?" he asked. "Francois Martin. Perhaps you've heard of me." Brant thought the name sounded familiar. Matt made it a point to visit the sheriff's offices any time they passed through a town of any size. Had his partner seen a wanted poster with this man's face on it and mentioned it on the trail? "Did Tarwater send you to kill us?" Martine chuckled. "I come to bring this colored boy back. Mr. Tarwater leaves the details to Francois." "You just tried to put a knife in me." "Turn him over. I'm tired of this business. I want to return home to my wife and children in Lafayette Parish." Once again, Brant bristled at the man's tone. "You have children? You don't seem like the type. You know, my daddy told me one time that if a man threatens to kill you, you best kill him first. I suggest you kill me, because if you don't, Francois will not fail a second time." Brant paused, then nodded. Killing one of Tarwater's men didn't seem prudent. Still, the smirking man with the odd accent had nearly killed him. Hunter thought once again about his father's advice. Oddly, something about Francois Martin reminded him of his father. The resemblance was not physical. His father had been tall and broad in the shoulders with sandy-colored hair. This man was dark and wiry, sinister-looking. The resemblance was more about the man's demeanor, his annoying confidence. Brant's father, in his younger days, had been possessed of the same annoying trait. How many times had Brant, after responding to one of his father's cutting remarks, found himself in the dirt? His old man had taught him how to fight, how to avoid a sucker punch and keep his guard up. Then Brant recalled something else about his old man. There had come a time when his father had grown less self-assured. The difference had come suddenly. An accident out plowing one afternoon had made a world of difference, even though the change at first had seemed small. "You know, my daddy lost his index finger 3 or 4 years before he died," Brant said. "Before that, he liked to talk shit like you. After he lost that finger, though, he couldn't wipe his own butt. Yeah, for a long time, my old man talked big and didn't think anything could hurt him. You might say losing that finger changed him for the better. Strange deal. Sometimes losing something makes you wiser. Is what I'm saying making any sense to you?" "You're not very smart, are you?" Francois Martin's voice dripped with disdain. "Why are you telling Francois about your father's stupid finger?" In the lamplight, Martin's profile cast an evil shadow. "I should probably just kill you," Brant continued. "But Mr. Tarwater hired us, same as you, so we're supposedly on the same side. Still, a man who jumps me in the dark and tries to put a blade in my liver, well, I can't just let that go. So I think you need to learn the same lesson my daddy learned. Brant bent down and gathered Martine's knife from where it lay in the sand. Nice blade, looks sharp. See, when Daddy lost that finger, it did a lot more than you might think. Stop talking, you're a boring man. Boring, stupid man. Yes, sir, you're right. I'm not known for my eloquence. I suppose I am a boring man. Brant flashed the knife once more, waving it back and forth, catching the light from Cecil's lantern. See, when Daddy lost that finger, I had to take over a lot of the chores. You wouldn't think losing a finger would be such a big deal, but the older I got, the more I saw it. It changed me, too. I learned to be a crack shot because of Daddy's finger. He couldn't hurt worth a damn after that. Couldn't pull the trigger. Brant waved the knife once more. What are you going to do with that? Francois realized now that Brant had something in mind, something involving his blade. Daddy lost his finger to a plow blade. Freak accident. Like I say, I hate to do this, but you jumped me. You say you want to kill me, and you seem arrogant enough to try again. So, this is fair play as far as I can see. In the darkness, Cecil watched as Hunter Brantley stepped behind the Frenchman. With a grunt, Brant pulled Martine to his feet, then brandished the glimmering blade before the smirking thief's face. With a vigorous push, Brant lifted Martine's bound hands upward, forcing the Frenchman onto his toes. No, stop! Francois Martine howled in English. What are you doing? What the hell? No! A moment later, Cecil watched in amazement as Brant sent the still glimmering but now bloodied knife sailing into the darkness. Martine sagged and would have fallen, but Brant forced him to remain upright, torquing the thief's arms upward. Remember my words, Brant said as he fished in his pocket, found the handcuff key, removed the shackle, and shoved Francois Martine away. Cecil expected the assassin to turn and attack, but instead, the wiry thief went crashing through the undergrowth and disappeared into the darkness. I could have killed you, Brant called out. If I see you again, I plan to. Cecil Johnson, who still held the Henry rifle, looked curiously at Brant. Are you just going to let him go? Brant didn't reply, but instead held out his hand. In his palm lay Francois Martine's severed index finger. With a snort of disgust, Brant sent the already graying digit into the night. The index finger's mighty important, Brant shouted, his eyes glowing, reflecting the moonlight like a feral animal's. You'll see, Francois Martine. Think about what I said.